We are back with another preview episode. The never-ending season. Penn State is going on their 15th game now, playing Boise State. Tim, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah, Happy all the holidays. How are we doing?
Oh, same to you, Pat. Doing good. I'm looking forward to catching the basketball team in action this afternoon, since I'm still up here in State College with my family. I'm sure we'll do some shows on the hoops team, especially once this memorable ride of a football season is over. Hopefully not until after they clinch the national championship on January 20th, but we'll get to that in a moment. But I'm looking forward to what should be an intriguing matchup. You got Penn State team that's shown some real balance on offense and defensively, at least in their last game, were able to make some big plays happen, which swung the momentum of the game and led to them basically having clinched spot in the quarterfinals by halftime against SMU, which I don't think most of us saw coming. Then you got a Boise State team led by, a Heisman Trophy guy who arguably could have won the Heisman Trophy, and Ashton Jeanty, who's capable. Competition aside, he's just been bowling over every opponent that's stood in his way. And it's kind of like as someone like me who's been watching college football for 30 plus years, he feels like a real throwback to the 90s or the early 2000s when teams would have
Who's
one
a comp you have
workhorse.
for him? Because I saw some tweets yesterday, people trying to
Oh
comp him.
man,
I saw some Saquon Barkley, which I don't see Saquon really at all.
no,
I mean, broken tackles.
he's
a little
not.
bit,
I mean, he's not super athletic like Saquon. Like you're not gonna see him hurdling guys. I think it reminds me of I'm just thinking like all these tough, I'm just gonna throw out some names, especially like 90s Big Ten running backs, but like Eddie George, Ron Dane. Hell, we'll say Kajana Carter. Just like tough runner. I mean, fast, but like also just a really tough runner, hard to bring down with just the first tackle. Just guy who will find ways to get his yards no matter how many guys you try to throw at him. So he feels like a real throwback to, reminds me of those guys, really. So,
I liked I saw some LaDainian Tomlinson comps, which I feel like I liked just because Genty's he's a little bit on the shorter side. I think he's like 5'10" or so. And Tomlinson wasn't like an overly huge guy, but for some reason was just able, had that
5'9"
perfect combination of speed, balance, could make could break tackles a variety of different ways. So I kind of like that one. But anyway, we'll get into Jeanty here in a second. Let me just set the stage. Not that, the people that are listening don't know this, but Penn State playing Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl is this weird Fiesta Bowl championship because Penn State is 7-0 in the Fiesta Bowl. Boise State is 3-0 in the Fiesta Bowl. Everyone obviously knows about their big victory over Oklahoma going on, almost 20 years ago at this point. So somebody's undefeated record in the Fiesta Bowl is coming to a close. This game is on New Year's Eve at 7:30. So I'm sure a lot of Penn State New Year's Eve parties around will have that game on. I know that mine will, and I'm sure Tim that yours will as well. So let's just jump right into it with Boise State, and we already talked about Ashton Jeanty a little bit. He's kind of like where you have to start with this Boise team. So the main question that is on everyone's mind is, how does Penn State stop Ashton Jeanty? And I don't even know if that's necessarily the right question, just because of how talented he is. And he ran for 2,500, 2,600 yards, something ridiculous like that. So it's not even so much how do you stop him, but Tim, how aggressive should Penn State be when trying to stop him? Do you think that they go with an 8-man front? Do you think that they, have some, have more faith in their defensive line, Abdul Carter, Devon J. Thomas, those guys to kind of get stops where maybe you don't have to bring Jalen Reed or Saki Wheatley straight to the box right away? How do you think Penn State goes about it? At least originally, we might see them change as the game goes along, but how aggressive should Penn State be when it comes to stopping Ashton Jeanty?
I think really it depends on how successful they are. I'm not sure if they'll come right out of the gate just trying to stack the box with 8 men and to contain I'll say contain, because let's face it, you're not stopping Ashton Jeanty. I'm just going to tell you guys now, he's going to get his share of yards. I'd be shocked if he doesn't go over 100 yards against Penn State, regardless what they throw at him. He's going to rip off a few explosive run plays. I'm just saying this now because I know in the comment, I'm not that I read the comments really during the games, but I just know there's going to be a few people freaking out after he rips off the first like 20, 30-yard plus run. And people are like, fire Tom Allen. And, so I'm just throwing it out there now.
Even as far as, like you say, like he's going to have over 100 yards, just to hit the least amount of yards that he ran for in a game was 127. And that was against Portland State because he only had 11 carries.
Yeah.
Utah State only had 186 because he had 13 carries. The team that had the most success against him as far as, kind of stopping him was UNLV back in October. He ran for 128 yards on 33 carries. So that's 3.9 yards per carry. So even with this Boise State offense, even if Penn State does a good job and say that they limit him to 3.2 yards per carry, something like that, Boise State's still going to give him the ball. So continue on, Tim. Just wanted to point out just how successful it's been.
And I guess to play off that, you look at the schedule though. There's only one, because they only played one power conference team and one that's comparative to Penn State in terms of defense and run defense. So that's another factor to consider too. But that being said, Jeanty will still get his yards. I'm not sure they come out right out of the gate and stack the box. They may try to feel it out and see if they can get away with just their front seven doing the work.
Yeah.
But if they notice that, Jeanty's breaking some tackles and stuff, and especially with the front seven, maybe they'll try to throw a secondary player in the box there to try and keep him from ripping off huge runs. So you may see them adjust as the game goes on. Personally, just having looked at their rest of their roster offensively, the receivers, while good, it's crazy that I'm saying this, but I would actually have our receiving room over Boise State's. You look at Boise's receivers, and it's not much to write home about. I'm just trying to pull it up here. So, the top guy, Cam Camper, which, if it sounds familiar, former Indiana receiver, 55 catches, 837 yards, 4 touchdowns. And then, the next best receivers are tight end, Matt Lauder, 523 yards, 6 touchdowns. So, but you look at, there's no one who really jumps out at you. And then you look at I guess we'll get to their quarterback in a moment, but you just look at their passing stats, and it's not bad, but it's nothing like, you're not looking. It's not like I looked at Kevin Jennings and SMU. You're like, oh, these guys can air it out. They're very much. This is not your older brother, or I'm trying to think of, like, it's been 18 years since the Fiesta Bowl, so I can't exactly say your father's Boise State team, but it's not the Boise State team you remember from the 2007 Fiesta Bowl, which hook and lateral and Statue of Liberty and slung it across the field for, type of team. This is very much like, they kind of have an old school ground and pound style.
Very traditional. Yeah.
So it's very, I guess, for us, Pat, it's kind of weird to see a Boise State team like this, but that's like their identity. And so, if things were up to me, I would stack the box, just try to contain Jeanty and just trust that our defensive backs can play the receivers in man coverage and, force their 5'10" quarterback, Maddux Madsen, to try to, beat us with his arm.
Yeah, I think that. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was just Penn State's linebackers against Jeanty. Jeanty has, according to PFF, I know that they hold some stats. Jeanty has or second most all time in broken tackles in a season. So just like a incredibly shifty player, incredibly powerful player though. Like, that's the thing. He kind of just has great balance and can bounce off tackles. And Penn State hasn't been. They haven't been the best when it comes to tackling, and specifically at linebacker. So I do think that there's some questions as far as, Don DeLuca, Kobe King. Kobe King's been pretty good. Kind of those other two, though. I mean, both of those guys stepped up big time against SMU, Rojas and DeLuca. But how comfortable do you feel with them as Jeanty gets into that second level? Because even the case of the defensive tackles, defensive ends, what Jeanty does so well is yards after contact. Like I don't know the exact stat, but it's just like his rushing yards after contact would be like top 10 just for yards rushed in the country, or like something crazy like that. So I don't know. I kind of want them just to be super aggressive from the jump. Like you kind of mentioned before, the Boise State guys that have a pretty good tight end. Cam Campers, was a pretty good, Big Ten wide receiver at one point in time. So has done well at Boise this year. But I would much rather just sell out and just do everything you can to stop Jeanty and to make those other Boise State skill position guys beat you than even give Jeanty the chance to kind of start going. And I know it's not necessarily, it doesn't mean that you bring 8 guys in the box and it guarantees that Jeanty stops, because I can kind of even understand the idea of maybe keep your safeties back a little bit farther, because it's going to be about limiting those Jeanty broken tackles. Instead of being a 48-yard gain for a touchdown, maybe it only goes 24 yards and you're able to make a stop in the red zone and force a field goal instead. So I can understand that you don't want to do like the old college football engage 8 where you have 8 guys blitzing coming right at the line of scrimmage. But I certainly think that you are going to tend to be, lean more on the aggressive side as far as do everything you can to stop Jeanty. Like I weirdly go back to and I know it's not an apples to apples comparison, but I go back to that Ohio State game in 2023 where Penn State just decided, you know what, Kalen King is really good, and we are just going to have him guard Marvin Harrison Jr. one-on-one, and we have faith in him that he can win his one-on-one battle. He did not. He could not. I certainly hope that they don't do that with Jeanty, where they kind of make him this nameless, faceless player and be like, hey, what we do defensively generally works. Let's continue to do that. No, don't do that. Stop that guy. That should be your main focus. And if Penn State loses because Maddux Madsen, throws for 350 yards, then you tip your cap to him. You tip your cap to him. So let's talk more about Maddux Madsen. So what does he do well? Where does he struggle? You kind of mentioned that he's a smaller quarterback. He's listed at 5'10", which, as someone who also lists themselves at 5'10", I can probably guarantee that he's a little bit under 5'10", but what should we know about Maddux Madsen going into this game?
Well, you look at his passing stats, and the first thing that sticks out to me is while he takes care of the football, only 3 interceptions to his 22 touchdowns thrown. But then you take a closer look at his completion percentage and average yards per throw. 62%, which not bad, but kind of on the lower end for what you'd want out of a quarterback. Averaging 7.5 yards per pass. So it tells me it tells me more. It's like they don't take a whole lot of shots downfield, but also more, it seems like he's a one read and throw kind of guy. They try to get the ball out of his hands quickly when it comes to throwing the football. And, so I think that's something Penn State needs to feel prepared for. They're going to try to just one read and throw. And they've had success against those types of quarterbacks. I'm thinking, Illinois, Luke Altmaier was like a one read quick throw guy. And, after the first drive of that game, the defense adjusted, and later on they ended up picking off a couple of his passes. So I think the defense can have similar success. And, because I really think the D line can give this O line some real I'm repeating myself. I said this about SMU too, but again, this is unlike SMU, which was first year in ACC, this is still a G5 program, and they have G5 caliber lines. So, and you're talking about one of the best D lines in not only Big Ten, but in the country, going up against this, G5 caliber O line. Not to say that, G5 is equals bad, but just, I think there's a real chance for this front seven to really wreak some havoc in the backfield here, if they, if they're able to have their way. So I'm looking at that. And of course, also, like I said before, I don't think their receivers are anything special. I think Penn State's defensive backs are capable of covering these guys one-on-one. So, you know, there's just a team. There's a team that just likes to seem like a team that's pretty good at throwing the short stuff. They don't take a lot of deep shots. Now, the thing with Madsen is he's our next best rusher after Jeanty.
That's what I was going to
50
mention.
carries, 224 yards, 5 touchdowns. So, you know, I'm guessing that also includes some, you know, he's been sacked 10 times. So I'm assuming that includes sack totals in there. But, you know, despite getting sacked 10 times, he's averaging 4.5 yards a rush. So, you know, he's a guy who maybe they designed some runs for him, or maybe he's a guy who if he gets pressured, he'll run away and try to buy some time for someone to get open, or just take off and just try to pick up a first down of his legs. So, you know, he's definitely somebody they have to account for as well, besides Ashton Jeanty. So, you know, he's a guy who can, you know, he's not unlike say Kevin Jennings and SC. He's not a guy who's a threat to bomb it downfield, but he can still hurt you in other ways if you don't take him seriously enough.
You mentioned Luke Altmaier before, and I kind of do like that comp. Kind of reminds me of Max Brosmer as well, the Minnesota quarterback. Madsen does have a little bit more, you know, when it comes to running the ball, as you mentioned, and I think that's where, you know, you think of like potentially getting upset and stuff like that. Like that's what you need from a quarterback like this, right? An offense where they're not asking him to do a whole lot. They're really going to focus on running the ball with Jeanty. But when they do drop back to pass and say it's, you know, in kind of that in between a little bit longer area of like 3rd and 7 or something like that, like Penn State needs to make sure that they're spying him, because I think that, like you mentioned before, probably more of a one read guy in like the Luke Altmaier aspect, you know, try to find Cam Camper, trying to find the tight end. I believe his last name is Lautner. And if that's not there, I wouldn't be shocked if Madsen's going to, you know, just knowing that who Penn State has on their defensive line of Abdul Carter and Denai Son and those guys, that he's not going to have 3.5 seconds to sit back there. He's going to have to make a decision. And one of those decisions is going to potentially be to, you know, tuck the ball and run. So I think Penn State just needs to stay, you know, sound in that aspect. He does a really good job of taking care of the ball, only 3 interceptions this year. So kind of similar to Brosmer, even though Penn State was able to intercept Brosmer, thanks to Dom DeLuca. I think you just got to stay sound in that aspect of, you know, making sure he stays in the pocket, even if you're not, you know, getting a sack, not to get too aggressive with, you know, someone like Abdullah, who, you know, can be prone to running upfield a little bit too much and take himself out of the play, or to have that violent spin move and kind of lose his balance. I think it's just a matter of, you know, keeping him in the pocket and just making him uncomfortable in that sense. Don't give him those lanes and stuff like that. But it's interesting because going into the season, most people expected that Boise State starting quarterback would be Malachi Nelson, former 5-star quarterback at USC, who ended up transferring to Boise. Has since lost the job and I believe transferred to UTEP. So Madsen just, you know, the fact that he's even the starting quarterback is a little surprising, at least coming into the season. But he did a good job last year when he got some time, and he's done, you know, a good job this year. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's someone that, you know, I believe he's only a sophomore. If, you know, 2 years from now, he is one of the better quarterbacks in the nation. I just don't know if that's going to be right now. All right. So we talked about Jeanty, we talked about Madsen, we talked about the skill position guys. Just overall, what are you kind of expecting? Not to get your score prediction, so don't give me your full score prediction yet, but what are you expecting from this offense? And I guess generally like this game, like, let's just say the Boise State offense. Do you think that they are able to have some success, or do you think it's like an SMU game where they just can't? They can't. I don't want to say SMU didn't have any success, because they actually did move the ball at times, but they, you know, had the turnovers. What are you kind of expecting of Boise State? I don't think that they're a team that's necessarily going to shoot themselves in the foot the way that SMU did.
Well, no, it's not. First of all, they're playing in a dome, so
Yeah.
I think that alone
72 degrees.
Should lead to a better production offensively right there for Boise State. And of course, they'll travel and play in State College with that roaring crowd. And I won't say the weather would affect them much, because they're in Boise, Idaho, which probably gets even colder than State College in December. or just as bad, I should say.
Yeah.
Unlike
Yes.
SMU, Dallas-based team having to adjust to playing outdoors. I mean, obviously that first drive they looked great. Then, I think it definitely affected them later on. But I digress. I do think the dome environment's going to help with offensive production. Of course, being a more neutral site, albeit I'm willing to bet it's going to be majority Penn State fans, even though I'm sure plenty of Boise fans will be there. Just by virtue of the fact Penn State's just a much larger school,
Yeah.
much larger alumni base than Boise. So,
I'm
and there's a
interested. What do
ton
you
of.
think it's going to be? Do you think it's going to be like 60-40 or because it's tough because
I'm thinking like 65-35 Penn
yeah,
State.
really. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
think
have no
so.
idea how big Boise is as far as a school. Like, let's see, Boise State enrollment. They have come on. 2023, 26,000, which I assume means, everyone, whereas Penn State is some crazy with all like the branch campuses. But I guess my thing is that one, Penn State fans have already traveled a lot, having to go to Indianapolis, and then even getting State College, just because Penn State doesn't have that fan base that just lives around Central PA, right? People are, you're coming from the DC area. I'm coming from the Philly area. People are coming from Pittsburgh. So
Well, I'll tell you, Pat, it's a massive alumni base, and they've got plenty of chapters and people out in the West
no,
Coast. And I mean, I have good friend of mine. I grew up in state, lives out in Southern California,
sure,
outside of LA. Large alumni base there. And I'm willing to bet the Phoenix area is no different. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of alums from there. Maybe especially because you're thinking maybe they didn't travel to either the Big Ten championship or the first round game. Hey, we can go check this one out in our
yeah,
backyard, or anyone. It doesn't have to be Phoenix. I mean, it could just be like maybe driving a few hours drive, or maybe a short plane ride over from where they live, and can easily catch one of their playoff games. So,
yeah.
I wouldn't underestimate the Penn State turnout. I'm thinking 65-35 at least. I just think it's again, much larger alumni and fan base compared to Boise, and I'm sure Boise fans will turn out. I'm not saying they won't. But I think you're going to hear the difference when watching the broadcast when Penn State makes a big play versus when Boise makes a big play. So just my humble opinion. But as far as how this game plays, how it's going to play out, fat off the score prediction, I guess, I think Boise has success moving the ball early on, especially because we know how this defense is under timeout. They takes them a drive or two to feel the opponent out. But also I'll say on the other side, I think Penn State, you saw how well they moved the ball against that vaunted Oregon defense in a domed atmosphere. And I think, I mean, look, no one's mistaken Boise's defense, as good as stats they put up. That is against G5 competition mostly. So no one's mistaken Boise's defense for Oregon's as far as pipe is concerned. And I think they can do some similar damage that they did to Oregon, have a good balanced attack running and throwing the ball. And I mean, I think this is a good chance at a redemption game for Drew Aller, who had a rough outing in the first round game against SMU. Thankfully, they didn't have to rely on him too much to win the game. But, I think they're going to need him to be more on his closer to his A game to win this one. And I think he can produce at that level. I saw how well he did against Oregon in the Dome, and I think you're going to see him have a similar one, hopefully with no interceptions this time.
Certainly. Yeah, the Boise State defense, it's average-ish. I mean, they're good as far as like Mountain West standards go. Like, I think they're probably like a top 4 defense in the Mountain West, but we look at them nationally just to give our normal rundown of rush defense, pass defense, stuff like that. Their rush defense is 27th nationally, so not bad, right? Upper tier, 3.63 yards per attempt. Their pass defense, 85th nationally. So they give up yards passing, 7.5 yards per attempt. So that's good for, as you mentioned, Drew Aller in a dome. Dome Drew has been generally really, really good. So hopefully that continues. I think the important thing to remember with Boise's defense, whether it's rush defense, right, where they are probably a little bit stronger versus their pass defense, is even though they're 27th nationally in rush defense, they still give up pretty big plays in the rushing game. So 20-yard rushes allowed, they're 75th nationally. 30 plus yard rushes allowed, they're 65th nationally. And pass defense is even worse. 20 plus yard gains allowed, 116th. And then when they allow 30 plus yard gains in the passing game, they're 119th. So this is a team that allows big plays, which is just a staple of James Franklin and Eddie Kolnicki. I mean, ever since James Franklin has been here, even when they had their sticky offense, it's like such like a big focus and point was we need to generate big plays. That is how
win the explosive play battle,
yeah,
and the turnover battle. Those are the two big things that Franklin emphasizes.
Yeah, so you look at this Boise defense, and although there's some good things to like, they do allow those big plays, and that's just kind of where I come back with. I know Boise has I think it's 51 sacks or something like that. So they blitz quite a bit. They get after the quarterback. They want to disrupt you that way, which totally understand and totally get. And Penn State's offensive line has been a little bit hot and cold when it comes to protecting Allard. Sometimes they can look like world beaters. Other times they, like against SMU, I think there was like a back-to-back sack situation. So I just feel like in a way that almost plays into Penn State's hand, though, like a team that wants to blitz like that, because if Andy Kolnicki knows that you're going to be aggressive and wants to blitz, where does Penn State want to get the ball to him? Who are the two main guys when Allard drops back? Who's he trying to get the ball to generally?
Tyler Warren or Nick Singleton.
Exactly. Where those guys are going to be on generally pretty short, easy routes, right? Nick Singleton just with dump offs, and Tyler Warren, just all over the field, but same thing, right? It's not like Allard's throwing 30-plus yard bombs to Warren all that frequently. So I just think that I think it's an interesting matchup as far as Penn State's defense versus Boise's offense goes, just because of Jeanty and what he can do. I think it's a fantastic matchup for Penn State's offense going against Boise State's defense, just because, okay, they can stop the run. They've shown that they can stop the run at times, but I just think that if you're going to be an aggressive defense that struggles to defend the pass and you're, so-so against the run, you give up some big plays in the run game though too. I just think that Kolnicki can cook something up where he can, have, Allard get the ball out quickly to Singleton or Catron or Tyler Warren or whoever, and they can find some success that way. So when I look at this game, and one of the questions that I generally think that we ask, and I'll ask you here, is like, how do you think Penn State wins this game? Is this like a defensive battle where they have to lean on their defense, or is this a game where they can put up 40-plus points? I think this is a game where, and I hate doing it, knocking on wood, because man, I got SMU right though. I will say that I said I was leaning more blowout on that. I'm kind of leaning blowout here too. I think that Penn State is not going to have much trouble with this Boise defense, which I feel like an idiot because this is going to be clipped by Boise fans and they're going to laugh at me. But what do you think? And do you think that this is like a game where Penn State can kind of explode offensively, or what?
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking back to the Oregon game, and we ended up in a track meet against a track school. Those of you we're not a running geek like I am. Oregon is like their track stadium, Hayward Field, is where they have the U.S. Olympic trial. It's where they host a bunch of like world class meets. So you get like the best runners, throwers, jumpers showing up to their stadium. Like they're a historically great like track program. But I was joking, you can't get into a track meet against a track school like Oregon. That's what happened, and they lost. But Boise, on the other hand, that's a team that Penn State absolutely should do a track meet against, because I think they can outrun these guys. And by outrun, of course, I mean I think they can light up the scoreboard, move the ball downfield more explosively and efficiently than Boise's capable of doing. Yes, Boise has Ashton Jeanty, and again, I said he will rip off a few big gains, but they don't seem to have. They still strike me as a team that's capable of ripping off explosive plays outside of that. now of course this being in a dome, who knows? But I just trust Penn State's offensive skill talent over, Ashton Jeanty notwithstanding. I trust Penn State's offensive skill talent to light it up more frequently than I do Boise's. And I think that Penn State's defense, they're battle tested. I mean, and then Boise's, they've done a good job, against the competition they played. But like you pointed out, they are very susceptible to giving up explosive plays. And I think this kind of goes back to what I'm saying. I think big redemption game coming up for Drew Aller. I like for him to throw for at least 2 touchdowns. I think like 250 yards for the air. Maybe he runs for a touchdown too. I think Nick Singleton and Katron Allen have at least a touchdown each. And I think one of them goes over 100 yards rushing in this one. I think Singleton, I think he maybe adds a receiving touchdown on top of a rushing touchdown in this one. I just really like Penn State here. And I think the key, if we want a similar outcome to SMU, like just blow out games effectively over at halftime type thing, I just think the important thing is they need to jump out. Or, I mean, I think that the key is if they can jump out to an early couple touchdown lead they did at SMU and then force them to have to maybe get away from their plan of just pounding the rock with Jeanty all game, I think that's where you can really start pouring it on this Boise team, because they want to, I think, grind it out. They kind of want to control the clock, control time possession. Keep Penn State, limit the number of possessions that Penn State's offense get. I think their staff knows, like, the more chances Penn State's offense gets, the better the chance they're gonna turn this game into a track meet, which is the last thing I think Boise State wants.
That's a good point. And I mean, I feel like you can say that about, right? Like the idea of, get out to an early lead. Like, you want to do that in every single game. But the same way against SMU, where it's like, okay, get out to a big lead because it's really cold. They're the away team. Like, I kind of mentioned this in my prediction for the SMU game, where I was like, not that I think that they're going to necessarily like quit or don't want to be there, but for an SMU team that was so close to, hosting a playoff game, and now instead of hosting a playoff game and having that bye, you have to go to State College on, the middle of December. It's freezing. I just was curious, if you go down 10-0, if you go down 14-0, something like that, like, what type of fight and edge do you have? And not to say that I thought SMU like quit or didn't have fight, but you just saw them, all of a sudden they're just not going to play the same way. You feel that pressure a little bit more. I don't necessarily think that's like the full case with Boise, but as you say, how they want to play is that they don't want Penn State to have the ball. They want to run the ball with Jeanty. If they can run the ball with Jeanty every single down, they would like to do that. So if you can get a lead on them, and all of a sudden that clock becomes, especially in the second half, becomes an opponent of Boise as well, that will certainly be good. I do want to say, as far as Boise's defense go, I do want to give some shout outs. Really good defensive end. Jaden Virgin Morgan has 10.5 sacks this year. Only a true sophomore, so really, really talented kid. I like one of their safeties, Oladipo as well, another talented kid who I think has an NFL future. So not to say that this Boise defense is bad by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that Penn State has kind of found their groove as far as what they do offensively, and we keep going back to that Big Ten championship game, but kind of showed what they can do, and I think was a big morale booster for that group. And yeah, I just think it's a tough matchup for Boise, and there is a difference between Penn State, a program like Penn State, and a program like Boise. Not that upsets can't happen, because I mean, we've seen firsthand with Boise in these Fiesta Bowls, but Penn State is sorry, Tim, just for 1 second. I saw like some Boise, I don't know who he was, blogger or something. Somebody tweeted out the video of him saying that Penn State wasn't like a fast team or athletic team. It's just like, how outdated, like, dude, it is not 2001. Like, it just incredibly, and I think that's like part of the issue. Like, I understand that Penn State is not, Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State, but when you look at, NFL draft picks, when you look at guys that lie at the combine, like, Penn State's in the top 5, top 7 of like the most talented teams in the country when you combine recruiting rankings and guys, programs that put dudes in the NFL. So I know that Boise State's, coach doesn't think that, and it's fine if their bloggers do, but I just think that there's going to be a different level of athlete, Penn State comparatively to Boise State across the field. Boise State certainly has some of those dudes, as I mentioned before, Ashton Jeanty we talked about, and, the defensive end, Virgin Morgan, and safety Oladipo, and a couple other guys. But I just think Penn State's too strong across the board. So, Tim, let's get into score predictions. I mean, It seems like you and I are both basically on the same page here, but let's put a number to what we think happens. Sounds like we think Penn State's going to win. What are you thinking score prediction wise?
My prediction would be 38-20 Penn State. Like I said, I do think I think Jeanty will have some early success running the ball, and I think they do get a touchdown or two early on. But also, I do think the Penn State red zone defense is held pretty well over. So I think they're Jeanty might set them up for a possible touchdown, but also they end up getting held to just settling for 3. So I do think they end up kicking a couple field goals. But I just come back to, I think this Penn State offense, for the most part, I think they'll be able to do what they want against this Boise defense. Again, not that it's a bad defense, but they are just the level of competition they played, Oregon notwithstanding. And that's an Oregon. They played Oregon at the beginning of this season when Oregon had yet to become the Oregon we know now.
People forget the game before that, Oregon just really struggled with Idaho, who's a good FCS team, but this Oregon team is in the level.
Yeah, and I just see Penn State moving the ball up and down, not having a whole lot of trouble. Like if they're struggling to move the ball, or if they turn, it's going to be more because they shot themselves in the foot as opposed to like Boise imposing their will on them. So I think, I'm thinking a big day for Drew, big day for Tyler Warren. I think Singleton and Allen cook on the ground. So, I like Penn State in the trenches on both sides of the ball too. I think I think they kind of wear them down during the game as well. And, I just don't think Boise I think Penn State can turn this into a track meet. And I don't think Boise can keep up in a track meet. Like if this was against SMU in a dome stadium like this, I think this would be a closer game because SMU is capable of being very explosive, especially for the air. But Boise is not that kind of team. Like Ashton Jeanty is the focal point of that offense. And if you're able to force them to have to do more than rely on him to keep up on the scoreboard, I think they're in real trouble. And I just think Penn State's one of those teams that can actually do that to Boise.
Yeah, I think that, and I talked about this in my random thoughts article on blackshoediaries.com. Make sure you're reading the website. The team that can beat Penn State, oddly enough, are the two teams that did, Oregon and Ohio State. Not that they're the only teams that can, but teams that have athletes at wide receiver that can really spread Penn State out and take advantage of those holes in the middle of the defense, right? Get the ball out quickly, kind of neutralize Abdul Carter as much as you can. And
they can go vertical too. I think that's the big thing. Like you can't beat this Penn State team by going side to side. Like
which West Virginia tried to do, and we found out they found out very quickly.
You cannot if you try to jet sweep and screen pass this Penn State team to death, it's going to end poorly for you. Just put it out there.
So I just think that, right, like all sports, I mean, football in particular is a game of matchups. And although Penn State through the James Franklin era, I mean, they've had some ugly games against teams that have focused just on, just one throw on the ball. We can think back to that Michigan game in 2021 where they ran for, over 400 yards or something crazy like that on the ground. But generally speaking, I think Penn State has done pretty well against, some of these ground and pound teams as far as, their defense making plays. You think about, the Iowas and the Wisconsins and the Minnesotas and even like the Illinois and things like that. So it's a Penn State team and program that is used to playing against teams like this. Obviously, Ashton Jeanty himself is a different beast and a different animal, and I'm sure he's going to have some frustrating runs as far as I'm concerned, where I'm going to want to scream at Tom Allen, even though he didn't do anything wrong. But I just don't think that this Boise team is this type of team that most of the time is going to be able to take out Penn State. Certainly can completely understand and completely willing to admit that upsets happen. It being at the Fiesta Bowl is a little creepy. As I know Penn State has good juju at the Fiesta Bowl too, but Boise State certainly carries their own as well. But I have it. You said 38-20, right?
Yes.
Okay, I have 38-21. So we are very, very close on our. I know I said around 40. I'll go a little conservative and say Penn State only puts up 38 points. But yeah, I just think that Penn State's gonna have a good day. I mean, like I've been saying, kind of repeating myself here. I think they match up quite well with them. Offense versus defense, or Penn State's offense versus their defense. Boise State's we mentioned before Penn State's tackling issues. Boise State is one of the worst tackling
dead
teams.
last.
They struggle as well. Which Nick Singleton, it'd be awesome if he could. I don't want to be mean to Nick Singleton, but break a tackle, my guy. Break some tackles. Make a guy miss. Don't get tripped out with your feet. I know I rewatched the SMU game I feel like 7 times by now, but they're just it's funny when you watch Saquon as an Eagles fan on Sunday and you watch Singleton on Saturday, and it's just like, oh man, Saquon would have broken that one so easily. So just little things like that I'm hopeful against Boise State that Singleton can break off that big run and break some tackles. But just good matchup for Penn State, man. Just a good matchup for Penn State. Think that they find success both offensively and defensively. So yeah, I have it Penn State 38, Boise State 21. You have it Penn State 38, Boise State 20. So we both have Penn State moving on to the semifinals. And like we talked about last week, or I guess it's a little bit more than last week at this point, but you get SMU at home, you get Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl. There are no excuses. Penn State needs to win these games. You get this path like this, and you see how things are breaking where, Georgia's going to be without Carson Beck. I know Notre Dame just had an injury to Riley Mills, one of their better defensive tackles. So knock on wood, Penn State is staying generally healthy these last couple of weeks, and hopefully that continues, because we're setting up very well for a semifinal matchup with either Georgia or Notre Dame. So let's actually get into that. Just real quick, Tim, the rest of the quarterfinal games, kind of what we think is going to happen. Let's start with that one. Georgia, Notre Dame. This is on New Year's Day. This is I think it's the 8:45 kick, which is very late.
It's the late kick. Yeah, it's the last one of what'll be a nice triple header of playoff games to
Certainly
get over your New Year's hangover.
What do you think in that one?
I think Georgia was a 2-point favorite, so that's effectively a toss-up. Yeah. Man, I mean, I know Carson Beck's not playing, but Gunnar Stockton is no slouch. And I saw how they were able to find a way to beat Texas in the SC championship game, beat them for a second time this year. Saw how they gritted out that 8 overtime win over an upset-minded Georgia Tech team. But man, at the same time, Notre Dame, ever since that loss to Northern Illinois, they've just kept winning. And
they have good vibes. They're winning how they're supposed to be winning.
I mean, I think similar improvement trajectory to Penn State. I mean, I feel like the quarterback is really settled. Riley Leonard's really settled in as a solid dual threat guy. And, I think just like Penn State, I mean, good run game. Receiving game is okay. Nothing to write home about, but it gets the job done. And their defense, I mean, that's the other thing. Just like Penn State, their defense has been
very similar.
Pretty solid. So, I mean, they remind me a lot of Penn State in a lot of ways. Man, I have
Georgia. I'm going Georgia. I do think it's going to be close. I think that Notre Dame.
I think I'm going to go. I'm going to score prediction. I'm thinking the Irish by a field goal.
Okay. All right. So you have Notre Dame advancing. I'm going Georgia. I just think that as good as Carson Beck is, and he's better than people give him credit for, he can also just lose you the game. And that was even in the lead up to these playoffs when it was at one point looking like Penn State might play Georgia in the first round. It's all right, well, at least with Carson Beck, you had the opportunity. He's going to throw just some stupid passes, and you just have to pick those off and take advantage of those. So, yeah, I'm curious to see how Stockton does. A little bit more of a runner. He has some stupid passes in him, as we saw against Texas too. But I just think with the layoff, you give Kirby Smart that much time, I think that he'll be able to cook something up, knowing, and they had a good idea that they were going to play Notre Dame. So I don't know. I like Georgia in that one, and I guess with Georgia, it's kind of I know they have losses this year, but I will believe Georgia loses when I see it type thing. When they're at their best, they're still very, very good. So give me Georgia over Notre Dame in a close one. The Rose Bowl, Ohio State versus Oregon. Ohio State, the 6th seed, is a 2.5-point favorite, which it is just I've seen some people online try to zag when everyone's been saying about how the 6th seed and the 5 seed Penn State and Texas have gone. They have the easier matchup. I've seen some people like Tom Fernell, Cover 3, shout out the Cover 3 podcast, him try to argue that no, Penn State and Texas, they had to play that prior to the games. They had to play that extra game. You always just want to play one game instead of two. I don't know. I don't know playing Ohio State as opposed to playing SMU and Boise State. I think if you asked Oregon if they could just have the 60, they probably would have taken it. But that's neither here nor there because we are here now. Ohio State, Oregon, what are you thinking, Tim? In the Rose Bowl. Just a great
game. Yeah, I mean, I think this should be the matchup of the day. I think this is the one that has the most potential to be a thrilling, high-scoring shootout. Yeah. Comes down to the last possession type of game. Man, I'll say the way Ohio State bounced back and blew out Tennessee really impressed me.
Yeah.
It's almost like Ryan Day was trying to make a point, keep hurt all the criticism after inexplicably losing to Michigan to a mediocre at best Michigan team. And so, I mean, and they only lost by a point at Oregon last time. And this time it's not in Autzen Stadium. It's at the Rose Bowl. And, there's, again, just like with Penn State, tons of Ohio State alumni across the country. I think it'll probably be majority Oregon fan, but it's going to be more like a 60-40 kind of split. It's going to,
sure.
There's going to be a ton of Ohio State. It's not going to be like Autzen Stadium this time, but man, I don't know. Ohio State strikes me the team that I'm not sure if I want to play them at this point. They look like a pissed off bunch, and I just think being revenge minded as they are, I think they end up avenging that early season loss and advancing to the semifinals. Take the Buckeyes in a close one.
I think that Ohio State wins as well. I've been saying I have to go back. We have to go back and listen to our first episode because I actually don't remember what I predicted. I think I predicted Oregon, Texas in the national title. I think I picked Oregon, but throughout this season,
I said Oregon too.
Yeah, I've just felt that Ohio State is probably the best team. You go to Oregon, like you say, and you only lose by a point. It's really hard to beat great teams twice in the same season. You always look at the NFL with the in division games and mid 2000s, when the Eagles and Giants would play. I feel like the Eagles would usually get there were seasons where they would go 2-0 against the Giants and have to play in the playoffs, and it was that's a good team. It's hard to beat them 3 times, and at least college football wise, the idea of Oregon winning again, it's just hard, and especially with how Ohio State's playing. I think the big question for them coming out of that Michigan game and into the Tennessee game was just what is their mental state? What is their mentality? are they still going to be hurting from that Michigan game? And they should that they are not. I mean, maybe they're still hurting, but they're taking their anger out on the opposing team. So I tight game. Think it's going to be a great game. Really excited for it. Just classic Rose Bowl matchup. Pac-12 versus Big Ten. We all love that. So I'm gonna go Ohio State though. I do think that Ohio State wins. And then
by the way, we're on the we're on a potential collision path between Ohio State and Penn State in the national championship game.
I've been joking with my friends that I think the season ends it can end a bunch of different ways, but the funniest of outcomes would be Penn State having to play Notre Dame or Georgia, specifically Notre Dame, just given their, I'm originally from Northeast PA, and went to a Catholic high school. So Notre Dame was basically 50-50 in my high school with Penn State. So it would just be a big matchup for me. But just the idea of Penn State plays like Notre Dame or Georgia in the semifinal, and they play Georgia, they win that, oh my gosh, we get over the hump, and then the final boss is there in the national championship game. It's Ohio State. It's like you need to beat Ohio State to win the national championship. And we all know what happens, Tim. We all know what happens. I will be taking out a $10,000 loan from whatever bank will give it to me, and I will be putting it on Ohio State in that case. But we'll talk more about the national title when we get there. Anyway,
if we get there.
Texas, Arizona State. We're going over 50 minutes at this point. So Texas, Arizona State. Texas is a big favorite. This game is at 1:00. They are minus 12.5 favorites. Are we thinking that Texas takes care of the Sun Devils?
I think so. I think it'll be close early on. I think I really like Cam Scatabo, their Arizona State running back. I think he'll do some damage early on. But, I think I don't know, Texas, I think I think they'll adjust, and I just think they have a little too much firepower offensively for Arizona State to keep up. So I think Texas ultimately wins by a couple touchdowns.
Agreed. It's a very similar game as far as compared to Penn State Boise, where you have this Arizona State probably has a little bit more juice offensively. Even their quarterback Sam Levitt, I would say, is probably a different level above Maddux Madsen, at least at this point in his career. But same idea of an Arizona State team that wants to depend on the running game, star running back, really tough runner, going against a good Texas defense, specifically off defensive line. I think if you were power ranking the defensive lines in college football, I think Texas and Penn State are, right up there as far as, two of the better ones in the country. So yeah, just like I think for Penn State, Boise, I think that Texas, if you're a lower tier school, no offense to Arizona State and Boise, if you're not one of the power players and your go-to is running the ball, you have to be really, really good at it, because most of these teams, like a Texas, like a Georgia, like a Penn State, Notre Dame, right, Ohio State, Oregon, we can name all the rest of the teams that are left. They have, bona fide NFL players on the defensive line, and that's hard to beat. So I'm going Texas as well, and think it'll be maybe not as big, maybe not like a 3-touchdown blowout or anything like that, but another comfortable victory for Texas. So, all right. So we are in agreement, Tim. Well, actually, you said Notre Dame, right? So I guess we're not.
I did say Notre Dame, so okay. That's the one place you disagree.
So you have Penn State, Notre Dame, and Texas, Ohio State. I have Texas, Ohio State, and then Penn State and Georgia. So, all right, we'll talk more about the semifinal if we get there. Please God, let us get there. I don't know if I can move on in life if Penn State loses this game. It'll just be so embarrassing, but positive thoughts only. We will maybe be with you New Year's Eve. I'm not going to be available. Tim's going to see if he can get someone to fill in, whether it's going to be Lando or somebody else from BSD to recap the game. If not, we'll have some sort of recap in the days that follow, win or lose. So we will be back. As always, guys and girls, make sure that you are liking the video. Make sure you are subscribing to the channel. I think that we're at 151 subscribers at this point, so let's up those numbers. We have tons of content planned for you in the offseason. I know Tim's going to be doing some basketball stuff. I've been working in the background on some football things as well. Nothing I want to talk about yet, but some exciting things on the horizon. So this will continue to be a weekly series on YouTube. So make sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss anything when we put it out. Thank you as always, and we will see you the next time.